Chapter 11. Who Stole the Tarts? The king and queen of hearts sits on their big chair when they come. There are many small birds and animals around them. All the cards are there too. The knave stands in front of them with chains. Two soldiers guard him. The white rabbit is near the king. He has a trumpet in one hand and a paper in the other. In the middle of the room is a table. On the table is a big plate of tarts. They look so good that Alice feels hungry. I wish they finished the trial, she thinks, and give out the food. But it doesn't look like this will happen. So she starts to look at everything around her to pass the time. Alice has never been in a court before, but she reads about them in books. She is happy that she knows the name of almost everything there. That's the judge, she says to herself, because of his big wig. The judge is the king. He wears his crown over the wig. He doesn't look comfortable, and he doesn't look good. And that's the jury box, Alice thinks. And those 12 creatures, she has to say creatures because some are animals and some are birds. I think they are the jurors. She says this word to herself 2 or 3 times. She's proud of it. She thinks, and she's right, that very few little girls her age know what it means. But jurymen would be just as good. The 12 jurors write very busy on boards. What are they doing? Alice asks the griffin quietly. They can't have anything to write yet. The trial hasn't started. They're writing their names, the griffin says quietly. They don't want to forget them before the end of the trial. Silly things, Alice starts to say in a loud, angry voice. But she stops fast. The white rabbit shouts, "Quiet in the court!" The king puts on his glasses and looks around worried. He wants to see who's talking. Alice can see. She's looking over their shoulders. That all of the jurors write silly things on their boards. She can even see that one of them doesn't know how to spell silly. He has to ask the person next to him. Their boards will be a big mess before the trial ends, Alice thinks. One of the jurors has a pencil that makes a noise. Alice doesn't like this. She goes around the court and stands behind him. Soon she finds a chance to take it away. She does it so fast that the poor little juror, it is Bill, the lizard, can't understand where it goes. So after looking all around for it, he has to write with one finger for the rest of the day. This doesn't work well because it doesn't leave a mark on the board. "Herald, read the charge," the king says. The white rabbit blows the trumpet 3 times. Then he opens the paper and reads. "The queen of hearts, she makes some tarts, all on a summer day. The knave of hearts, he steals those tarts and takes them all away. Think about your decision," the king says to the jury. Not yet, the rabbit says fast. "There's a lot more to come before that." "Call the first person to talk," the king says. The white rabbit blows the trumpet 3 times and shouts, "First person to talk." The first person is the hatter. He comes in with a cup of tea in one hand and some bread and butter in the other. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," he starts, "for bringing these in, but I don't finish my tea when they call me." "You should have finished," the king says. "When did you start?" The hatter looks at the March Hare, who comes into the court with him. The dormouse is with them too. March 14th, I think, he says. 15th, the March Hare says. 16th, the dormouse adds. Write that down, the king says to the jury. The jury writes down all 3 dates on their boards. Then they add them up and change the answer to money. Take off your hat, the king says to the hatter. It's not mine, the hatter says. Stolen, the king shouts. He turns to the jury, who write this down right away. I keep them to sell, the hatter says to explain. I don't have any of my own. I'm a hat maker. The queen puts on her glasses and starts to look hard at the hatter. The hatter turns white and moves around nervously. Give your story, the king says. And don't be nervous, or I'll kill you right now. This doesn't help the person talking at all. He keeps moving from one foot to the other. He looks worried at the queen. He's so confused that he bites a big piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just then, Alice feels a very strange thing. It confuses her a lot until she understands what it is. She starts to grow bigger again. At first, she thinks she will get up and leave the court, but then she decides to stay where she is as long as there is a room for her. I wish you wouldn't push so much, Dormouse says. He sits next to her. I can hardly breathe. I can't help it, Alice says very quietly. I'm growing. You don't have the right to grow here, the Dormouse says. Don't say silly things, Alice says more bravely. You know we're growing too. Yes, but I grow at a normal speed, the Dormouse says. Not in that silly way. And he gets up very angry and goes to the other side of the court. All this time, the queen keeps looking at the hatter, just as the dormouse goes across the court. She says to one of the people in the court, Bring me the list of the singers in the last show. The poor hatter shakes so much that his shoes fall off. Give your story, the king says again angrily, or I'll kill you whether you're nervous or not. I'm a poor man, your majesty, the hatter starts in a shaky voice. And I don't start my tea not more than a week or so, and with the bread and the butter getting so thin, and the shining of the tea. The shining of what? The king asks. It starts with the tea, the hatter says. Of course shining starts with a T, the king says sharply. Do you think I'm stupid? I'm a poor man, hatter goes on, and most things shine after that, only the March Hare says. I didn't, the March Hare says very fast. You did, the hatter says. I say I didn't, the March Hare says. He says he didn't, the king says. Leave out that part. Well, anyway, the dormouse says. The hatter goes on. He looks around worried to see if the dormouse will say he didn't too. But the dormouse doesn't say anything. He is fast asleep. After that, the hatter goes on. I cut some more bread and butter. But what did the dormouse say? One of the jury asks. I can't remember, the hatter says. You must remember, the king says, or I'll kill you. The sad hatter drops his teacup and bread and butter. He gets down on one knee. I'm a poor man, your majesty, he starts. You're a very poor speaker, the king says. Here one of the guinea pigs cheers. The people in the court stop him right away. They do it like this. They have a big bag that ties at the top of the string. They put the guinea pig in the bag head first and then sits on it. I'm glad I see that, Alice thinks. I often read in the news at the end of the trials there are some tries to clapping, which the people in the court stop right away, and I never understand what it means until now. If that's all you know about it, you can go, the king goes on. I can't go any lower, the hatter says. I'm on the floor already. Then you can sit down, the king says. Here, the other guinea pig cheers and is stopped. Good. That's the end of the guinea pigs, Alice thinks. Now we can go on better. I'd rather finish my tea, the hatter says. He looks worried at the queen, who reads the list of singers. You can go, the king says. The hatter leaves the court very fast. He doesn't even wait to put his shoes on. And cut off his head outside, the queen says to one of the people in the court. But the hatter is gone before the person can get to the door. Call the next person to talk, the king says. The next person is the Duchess' cook. She carries the pepper box in her hand. Alice guesses who it is even before she comes into the court. The people near the door start sneezing all at once. Give your story, the king says. Won't, the cook says. The king looks worried at the white rabbit. The white rabbit says in a quiet voice, Your Majesty must ask this person questions. Well, if I must, I must, the king says. He looks sad. He folds his arm and looks angry at the cook until his eyes are almost gone. Then he says in a deep voice, What are tarts made of? Pepper, mostly, the cook says. Sweet stuff. A sleepy voice behind her says, Catch that dormouse, the queen screams. Cut off the dormouse's head. Throw that dormouse out of court. Stop him. Pinch him. Cut off his whiskers. For some minute, the whole court is in a big mess. They try to throw the dormouse out. By the time they settle down again, the cook is gone. Never mind, the king says. He looks very happy. Call the next person to talk, and he says quietly to the queen. Really, my dear? You must ask the next person questions. It makes my head hurt. Alice watches the white rabbit as he looks through the list. She's very curious to see who the next person will be. They don't have much information yet, she says to herself. Imagine how surprised she is when the white rabbit reads out in his high little voice the name Alice.